Well, still with football, but with matters off the field now, because the spotlight will fall on South African football next week, but it will not be from the playgrounds, but from the courtrooms. Firstly, the Sundowns versus Pitso Mosimane and empty sports court case returns at the South Gauteng High Court in Joburg on Tuesday and Wednesday. And on Thursday at the Palm Ridge Commercial Crimes Court, it's the state versus SAFA president Danny Jordaan and other fraud and theft cases return for, as this case returns for a second appearance. But there's also the critical matter of PSL clubs that are receiving transfer bans left, right and centre from FIFA over contractual disputes. And joining us now in studio to discuss these matters is our sports law expert Mandla Chabalala of Chabalala Inc. Good evening and thank you for joining us, sir.
Good evening, Tabiso, and good evening to all of you.
There's more football in the courts than on the field, eh?
Sad, very sad story.
How sad, though, are these cases of clubs not meeting their contractual obligations and these cases of having to go to court, because you've worked in this place before?
It's very sad in a sense that, you know, when you get employed, there's always promises of financial obligations. And when your employer does not meet its financial obligations, then an employee is left with no option but to take steps in order to recover the money in the form of compensation. And we've seen that happening in football. Now, clubs are deemed as being the employer, the players are employees because they enter into a contract of employment. So it's like any other an employer-employee relationship. So if you don't, as a club, you don't meet your financial obligations, there's bound to such measures to happen because the player now becomes desperate and they will seek some intervention from the regulatory bodies in the form of NSL or FIFA in this case. And the rules are clear that, I mean, when you look at, I think it's Article 50.4 of the NSL handbook, the opening statement says the club must meet its financial obligations in paying the player. Same as, I think it's Rule 12B of FIFA, says exactly that the status on the transfer and the transfer of players. It says exactly that. So once there's that contract, then you're bound to live by that contract. You need to respect and maintain the integrity of that contract.
And what are the options available for players? Because we see sometimes we find out about this case when they're already with FIFA. Should they not be starting here at home with the dispute resolution chamber before they go that far?
Well, in most contracts, especially at PSL, NSL, there is a standard contract which says the NSL DRC will have a jurisdiction to deal with all these matters. But now you have international players whom they prefer to go directly to FIFA because FIFA will have a joint jurisdiction with that of the NSL. So there is no limit or restriction on the foreign players. So they prefer going that route instead of the legal route here at home. I don't know whether it's a trust issue, but again, most of them are being represented by international agents, by international attorneys or lawyers. Then they prefer to take those matters to FIFA instead of coming here.
We've got another case that's also got a lot of attention. Sundowns and Pitso Mosimane's company, Empty Sports, by the way. They're going to court for closing arguments next week. Have you followed this case and what do you make of this also?
Well, it's a contractual issue. There's an allegation of a breach of contract from Sundowns against the agent. The difficulty of that is that there's evidence that has been presented to court. Now, in the closing argument, you must remember we're trying to convince the court that you are right or the other party is wrong so that they can rule in your favor. So we dealt with this case. We looked at the case. It's a bit dicey because the terms specifically says if the coach needed to leave, so there needed to be some action that needed to be taken between the two teams, which has not been taken. And in that case, then Sundowns claimed that there was a breach of contract. Now, whether there was indeed a breach of contract, that will be determined by the court after the closing argument has been presented by both parties.
And the other argument is that there's this clause in the coaches' contracts, but other coaches don't have this clause here. Does that hold water?
Well, if you allege based on the contract, then let's read the contract. Firstly, let's read it as it is, and then in the absence of that, then let's see the tacit clauses, what the implication or the implied terms of the contract says. But firstly, let's see what the contract says. If there was a clause of that nature, then that clause is what it is. It does not need any interpretation.
And it does not need another contract to look at and say that these contracts are not the same. But just to move on, there's another matter of the SAFA president going back to court. It's the second appearance now, him and his co-accused. What is likely to happen in the second appearance now?
Well, chances are it's still going to drag. This is the early stages of the case. Now, they've appeared for bail application. The charges have not been laid to them. They have not pleaded. Until such time it happens, then then one will have confidence to say, then maybe the trial will start. There's disclosures that still need to happen. The disclosure in the sense that the state must give the representative of the accused all the charges. And the likelihood is that there might be representatives that are to be made. You make representatives to the deputy public prosecutor who sees the representation and determine whether there is a case to be answered by the accused. If there's no case, then the likelihood is that this matter won't go forward. But if there is a likelihood, then they'll have to be charged. The charges will have to be read to them, and they'll have to plead, either they're pleading guilty or not guilty. And if they plead not guilty, then the trial proceeds. But I don't see it proceeding anytime soon, maybe this year or maybe later next year, once all these preliminary issues have been dealt with.
Okay, Mandla Chabalala from Chabalala Inc., thanks for joining us to talk about matters off the field. You are a sports law expert, by the way, and that's why let's bring you here. And you're familiar with how things work in South African football. Always a pleasure talking to you, sir.